This is the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
I was. Part of the reason we had so much fun beating Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
Let's get it going on a Wednesday morning. Thanks for joining in. Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent, July 27th, 2022. Domination again for Clemson at the ACC kickoff event, the preseason media event. No surprise yesterday. Clemson dominant, the dominant pick to win, their 7th out of the last 8 after snapping the streak last year of 6 in a row. Couldn't make it 7 in a row. Intervention is the word out of Big Ten media days. That was from Iowa coach Kirk Ferentz. College football needs intervention right now. This was after the Big Ten commissioner, Kevin Warren, says, yeah, we might continue to expand. Handful of programs out there that can add value. And that is part of what Ferentz is saying. The most unstable place college football has been, not necessarily from the conference alignment standpoint, but with name, image, and likeness all factored in. A couple more preseason honors or lists made for Gamecocks yesterday. Cam Smith, Dylan Wanham in particular. Aaron Rodgers. Wow. He got exactly what he was looking for, didn't he? It just shows where we are in July with football. Training camps kicking off, and Aaron Rodgers rolls in Nick Cage style. Hilarious to me yesterday. And probably the larger discussion today on the program. You think you know how these things are going to go going in, but you never really know. So I don't know. But I'm guessing maybe what we'll talk about most today is the future of the college football playoff, with Iowa State athletic director Gene Smith on the record saying, "It's 16 teams that's out there." I'm not sure exactly what that means, what kind of statement that is, but we'll try to break it down today as we get going on a Wednesday morning before football season is kicked off at large. A bunch of you guys helping us kick off the show. Jason, RL, Anthony with a good morning UFAs. Hope weighing in. He says, Clemson, ACC favorite. Shocker. So let's start there, shall we? And good morning to you guys. The YouTube live stream is where all those guys are hitting us up this morning, up and rolling video stream-wise there, Twitter and Facebook, as always, from 8 to 10, Monday through Friday. We got the audio stream going on Podbean, and then the podcast will archive soon thereafter all over the place. However you join us, it is much appreciated. Please know that each and every day. Do not take it for granted. I do not take it for granted, I'm trying to say. So I'll pop up Brent McMurphy relaying the ACC preseason media poll on Twitter yesterday at, did I say Brent? It's obviously Brett. At Brett McMurphy with an underscore in between the first and last name. The ACC preseason media poll, let's see, you get about 150 votes. I think there are a few more than that, and Clemson gets 103 of them. The next closest school gets 38 votes, and I was a bit surprised that was NC State. I know I've seen that some people are going, they're big fans of Devin Leary and think he's going to be a difference maker for NC State at quarterback. NC State has a history of having some pretty dang good quarterbacks, but they don't have much of a history of winning ACC championships with Russell Wilson or Phillip Rivers. Who else was the other one? They had Jacoby Brissett there for a little while as well. So NC State at 38 votes, Miami the next, and they were picked to win the other side. Was it Coastal or Atlantic? I always forget, and those things are going to go away eventually anyway, so we don't have to worry about it. But Miami with the next most votes, Wake Forest, Pitt, Virginia, Florida State, North Carolina, Boston College, all getting a few votes. But I think the more interesting part is the way that it breaks down division-wise. And pop those up right now with NC State a solid second in the Atlantic and Wake a distant third, Louisville fourth, and Florida State picked to finish fifth in the Atlantic. Boston College and Syracuse round out the division. The day that Florida State is picked a couple of spots behind Wake Forest in college football, that's where we are right now in 2022. On the other side, it's no big surprise year. Won the whole thing last year. They're picked to finish second behind Miami, North Carolina third, Virginia fourth, Virginia Tech fifth, Georgia Tech, and Duke rounded out. So Florida State and Virginia Tech, former dominant programs in the ACC, both picked to finish fifth in their division. I think an argument for the ACC for overall conference strength. Unfortunately, that argument falls relatively flat when you got a North Carolina team picked to finish third who just got run by a South Carolina team picked to finish fifth in its division. When you got a Pitt team that's picked to finish second in their division who just lost one of the best quarterbacks and the best college wide receiver in the country. So no huge surprises. Just wanted to start there today. The pressure squarely back on Clemson in a lot of ways, and in a way unlike we've ever seen before, right? The run that Clemson has been on has been whatever adjective you want to use. Dominant is the one that I'll use. Absolutely dominant. From the ACC perspective specifically, but in the national perspective, something that I think most of us in the state of South Carolina, I think Clemson fans would probably even admit it didn't see coming. Not like this. But we also haven't seen the drop-off, even though it was just 3 losses. But not winning the ACC championship last year for a 7th straight time was a massive surprise in a lot of ways. To see Clemson look relatively human, a big surprise in the 2021 season for sure. Once you weigh it in, Craig says, Wake over the teams they are over. And with a laughing emoji. And Jason just says, that list, yuck, some weak teams. Let's go back to it then. The weak teams there. In the Atlantic, I'd say, I don't know, when you have NC State number 2, and I know they're supposed to be relatively strong this year, but I mean, this is a list, isn't it? Coming off of SEC Media Days, where it was in the East, we had a lot of discussion, obviously, because South Carolina's in the mix there. 2 through 6, or really 3 through 13 overall, I think, from an SEC perspective, but especially in the East. This looks like an SEC East conversation outside of Clemson, doesn't it? That's what I see here. NC State, Kentucky-ish. I think Kentucky would probably maybe take some offense to that after last year. Tennessee fans, I think, fully expect to be better than all of these teams outside of Clemson. So, whereas in years past, I felt the ACC, I think what Troy brought it up, maybe in 2016, they had a really good record against SEC schools, 12-3, something like that. In years past, I've seen that gap narrow between the SEC and ACC football. It does not appear that that's happening at all here this year. And Florida State and Virginia Tech, I'm looking square at you as being one of the main reasons why. When those programs are picked to finish 5th, and you don't have Miami, for instance, being anywhere close to a national championship contender in the preseason talk. Who knows? Maybe they'll have a heck of a run, but I don't see that coming. I don't think Miami fans necessarily see that coming either. It's looks like some slim pickings. It looks like a lot of fringe top 25 programs right there. But that's the brilliant part of talking about it this time of year and then actually seeing it. We'll see. We'll see if, and I've heard it, I think, from the other side, from the Clemson perspective specifically, that Georgia can't sit there and thump its chest about an SEC, a typical SEC schedule with what the East represents right now. Kentucky picked to finish 2nd. Tennessee picked to finish 3rd. Florida 4th. The Gamecocks 5th. With all the challenges those programs have in front of them and what they haven't proven to this point heading into the 2022 season, coming off 2021. So that's how I see the ACC preseason poll there, and I'm not a guy that puts a ton of stock into that. And I think we all know if we've been around college football for any significant period of time, how much fun it is to go back even middle of the season and look at the predictions, reread the narratives, and see sometimes how far off those things are. And it can happen quickly, like mid-season, like I'm talking about. Seeing on social media some records through 6 games popping up, projections, right? That's a fun little game to play, and maybe we'll play that a little bit later on. But I wanted to get to what I think is the larger story in college football. First, let me touch on just the quick Gamecock news yesterday. Again, standard stuff, preseason watch lists. Having an offensive lineman on the Outland Trophy watch list is a good sign. Super senior Dylan Wanham, the South Carolina name, one of 89 on the preseason list there for the best interior lineman in the country. Take that for what it's worth. If you're an SEC program and you don't have a name on the Outland Trophy watch list this time of year, it's not a good sign. You should absolutely do that. And again, some of these lists, the ones that I'll pay a little bit more attention to have about 35 names on them. And then this list with 89, so basically one from every major program in college football. Bronco Nagurski watch list is what Cam Smith was on as well, and that's a similar type number with 85 names on it for the best defensive player in the country. And Cam Smith getting the most preseason hype, I think, from the Gamecock perspective. Can add this one to the list. The Nagurski Award just right up in Charlotte, given out by the Charlotte Touchdown Club, by the Football Writers Association of America. So Cam Smith continues to add to the preseason accolades. Dylan Wanham getting a little preseason love from the Gamecock perspective. Craig says Gamecocks could be in the top 15 in recruiting if this weekend goes well. Still early, but yeah, just the fact that you can project that is a good sign, certainly, for Gamecock football. I think it's like 4 guys that might end up making some commitments this weekend. Again, not being a recruiting guy, we won't get into that too much. Certainly will talk about it if it does happen, but all the speculation, and we're not going to go 360 degrees in that conversation day after day after day. The more interesting part of the college football discussion yesterday happened with Big Ten Media Days. And Kevin Warren not tipping his hand necessarily, but not being too secretive, saying, yeah, they might continue to expand if they find better partners or more partners out there who can add value, I think is the best way to put it, like Southern Cal and UCLA. Handful of teams out there is the report, or is what he told, I think, the media outlet that Brett McMurphy does work for now, the Action Media Network or whatever they're calling it. Handful of teams out there, and then I've seen 7 schools out there on the list, which is a big handful. Notre Dame being at the top of that list, Oregon, Washington, Stanford, maybe Cal on there as well as a couple of ACC teams not named Clemson. A bit of a surprise. Miami and Florida State, I think the only 2 ACC teams, current ACC teams on that list. North Carolina might have been on there, maybe not. Whatever it is, I put little stock into it because this is not how it's gone, as we've seen recently with the expansion. Texas and Oklahoma wasn't reported to be going to the SEC weeks and months before it happened. It just happened. It was maybe a couple of days. I think it was a Houston paper that kind of broke that news. Southern Cal and UCLA was a matter of hours. We heard rumblings, and then it was there. So I don't put a ton of stock into the latest little wrinkle there, that there's a handful-ish of teams out there who the Big Ten might be headed towards next, or that might be headed towards the Big Ten next. But just the fact that Kevin Warren's out there saying, yep, expansion might continue, it's pretty much what we heard from Greg Sankey, but in a different way. And I think that goes to show you where the Big Ten is versus the SEC. The SEC, clearly the dominant conference in college football, with national titles, with NFL draft picks. The numbers back it up, so you can come at it more of a position of strength, saying we feel good where we are, but we'll be nimble moving forward, as opposed to, we might continue to grow from the Big Ten's perspective, still looking to challenge the SEC, to overtake the SEC as the top conference in college football. I think Iowa coach Kirk Ferentz's comments yesterday, the most notable. College football is he didn't say chaotic. It was Pat Fitzgerald there from Northwestern who used that word, I think. Chaotic right now. But just mentioned it. Ferentz mentioned it needs intervention. It needs a stable voice. Not getting any of that. We touched on a little bit yesterday about, the idea of a college football czar, someone at the top whose job it would be to look at things from the big picture, maybe not even a day-to-day type deal, but big picture down the line, stabilize, get all the conferences and teams and everything that is seemingly going in every which way, always looking out for their own interest, to kind of pull together and move forward. And the name, image, and likeness stuff is kind of at the top of that list. And for Ferentz, who's 67, who does say, like all college coaches have to say pretty much these days, that he is for athletes being able to monetize their name, image, and likeness. But for a guy like him, I completely see it, right? We saw Dan Mullen pretty much just throw his hands up and say, I don't want any part of this anymore. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what college football was. And this goes into a comment I retweeted yesterday from NFL training camps, right? And it was coming out of Jacksonville. I'm going to get exactly who said it for you, looking that up. It was a player responding to the difference between Doug Peterson and Urban Meyer. This is Josh Allen, the former Kentucky linebacker. Pretty much laughing. Well, they laughed in the response, asked if there's a difference between Doug Peterson and Urban Meyer, the big soft toss to him there. He just laughs at it's a professional locker room. It's a professional setting. He's talking to us like grown men, which is about as strong an indictment that you can get from the previous regime. And we all saw it coming, right? I mean, nearly everyone who's followed football who was anywhere near a microphone when Urban Meyer got the Jacksonville Jaguars job said, hey, this ain't going to work. Don't see it happening. Not good. We get it. Florida is different. And yes, he's a popular guy, won championships in Florida, and maybe that'll help sell some tickets and successful college coach and all that. But we've heard him talk too, right? You guys ever seen that intensity? And we've seen a bunch of other guys, and it hadn't worked out well. And that one statement, just and the way it was said, like, yeah. Is there any difference? Yeah. Professional versus that, hey, I'm in charge. I'm going to kick the kicker and still being sued for that, I think. The Jaguars are. Is that Josh Scobie, I think, their old kicker? Said Urban Meyer kicked him in pregame warmups as he's going by. Just the mindset of that, man. It's so ridiculous. But my point in this is the chaos of college football from the outside looking in. And where does it go from here, man? And not just from a conference alignment, not just from a name, image, and likeness, not from everybody pretty much playing from the same rule book, as opposed to, I think it was Ferentz that was asked about Saban and Jimbo, maybe, or I don't know if he brought it up by himself. I'm sure he was probably asked, but not a good look when guys are going at each other publicly and the whole thing. But no adult in the room, really, right now, stand up and say, all right, kids, well, I get it. You all want to win, but here are the rules. It reminds me of an Andy Griffith segment my pops always likes to repeat, trying to figure out exactly how it goes. Barney Fife explaining all the rules to the one person in jail that's always in jail. Here are the rules. Number 1. What's the number 1 rule? I forget. Number 2 is obey all rules. It's just like that. It's pure chaos with the inmates running the asylum in a lot of ways. And so when you're 67-year-old Kirk Ferentz, you've seen a bunch of eras in college football. His comments yesterday at Big Ten Media Days hold a lot of weight for me. Needs intervention. Needs somebody to come in. Not an intervention necessarily, but kind of. You need somebody to trick Greg Sankey, Kevin Warren, maybe all the commissioners, right? Jim Phillips from the ACC, the Big 12 and the Pac-10-ish. I guess you invite them now, but maybe you got to invite all the big-time coaches in there. Trick everybody to get on a Zoom call, whatever you got to do. Say, all right, here's the deal. Name, image, and likeness. You guys completely screwed this up, and we know you're all cheating. Jimbo, shut up. We don't want to hear that you're not breaking rules or laws or the whole thing. We're talking about the spirit of the law here, sir. All right, Saban, stop laughing. You don't have to cackle. You don't have to say I told you so. Stop pointing at him. But you guys are ruining it for the future. You're doing exactly what we wanted not to happen, where kids are getting paid to come to your school. We know what's happening. It's happening everywhere. And 8-figure deals is absolutely ridiculous. So here's how we're going to stop that from happening. Now that's what would get someone that job and have them be a legend in college sports right now, because that part just seems to be near a calculus that no one can do right now. Troy, I bet a friend $50 that Urban wouldn't make it a full season with Jacksonville. Well done. Thank you, Craig, with Otis the Town Drunk. Yes. The Andy Griffith reference. I'm not an expert. That was the easiest money you ever made, Troy. $50. Urban Meyer wouldn't make it a full season with Jacksonville. I hope your friend paid up. So now it's, can college football get a hold of it? I think it's going to take a while if they actually do, but I wouldn't put $50 down that they will. I just think more that boosters are going to figure out exactly how best to use their money. And that'll all calm down a little bit, or maybe we'll just get used to the idea. We will get over the idea that that's exactly what it is. It'll just be another NCAA rule that we all know, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, just is toothless, right? Just like we all knew that big-time recruits, and there's been dirty recruiting going on forever. And we all kind of turned a blind eye to it for the most part, unless it's just absolutely egregious and you're a school like Tennessee where you actually want to get rid of your head coach so you don't have to pay him $12 million in a buyout. And you got to become your own police. So with all that being said, that kind of leads us to the next question. What is your number? I ask you. Do you have a strong number? Because I don't. I love college football, and I'm not one of those people who has got my own system worked out and saying, no, college football's got to do this to determine a champion. Because growing up, when polls determined a champion, still love college football. When the BCS determined a champion with one game through computer rankings, still love college football. Now that's evolved to the college football playoff, even though it's pretty much a handful of teams that we see in that sucker every year, and the semifinal games can be big-time duds, still love college football. It's given us some really good championship games. But now maybe it's the idea that Ohio State AD Gene Smith put out there yesterday, that 16 is out there, is a number that's being talked about or that's being considered in the whole thing. And who knows if that's even true at all. I never know exactly how this game is being played. Like, hey, Gene, you mind? We're absolutely trying to get 12. So can you float a bigger number out there that will help people come around to the idea, that will help us get more votes that we need eventually to get a 12 team? I don't know if that's how it works. It wouldn't surprise me. I think we're naive to think that everything's on the up and up, especially at this point of the year with public comments. But the idea of a 16-team playoff going from 2 to 4 made sense to me. Going from 4 to 8 makes sense to me. Going from 4 to 16, that's a massive shift. That's a big jump that I don't think I'm ready to take right now. Again, I'm not one of those guys that's going to tell you, hey, yeah, this is the system that I'm looking for. You got to have the conference champions, and then you have at-larges, and you got to make sure there's a group of 5 and the whole. I'm not that guy. I think that no one's asked me, and so I haven't come up. I haven't spent a bunch of time trying to work out the details, because ultimately I am not going to be one of the authorities in all of this. And because what I've seen previously, multiple different ways of deciding national champions, I still have loved college football every single year. That none of those processes, none of the formats have made me think, "Oh, I don't like college football anymore." And I think the idea that people float out there like, "Oh, this is going to make the regular season mean nothing." Then you come at college football a tremendously different way that I do, right? Oh, there's going to be college football this fall? Oh, I love the fall. I love college football. I'm going to love this. Is it going to be perfect? No. And maybe this is coming at it, growing up, going to games at Williams-Brice Stadium, where I don't know if you guys noticed, but national championships weren't flooding in. 1984, that did happen. There was number 2 in the country, but then the end happened there as well. And it wasn't a national championship coming Carolina's way. So maybe it depends on but I think South Carolina, that example is much more the rule in college football, where you got 130 plus programs, even if you're just going with Power 5 programs where you got 60 some. More often than not, those teams are not in the national championship conversation. Just not. Math works, right? That's how the math works. You got expectations, you got promise, you got big-time recruits, you got the possibility of recruits changing things, you got all of that. You got a new coach, you kick out an old coach, whatever it is, whatever part of the cycle, the college football cycle you're on. To me, it's all part of the beauty of college football, no matter how a national champion has been determined. However, they moved to 16. You're talking about, in my mind, a pretty seismic shift. Now, maybe they can do it in a way where it's not just a completely drastic product than what we've seen, a completely drastic way to crown a champion. Maybe you just kind of extend the college football playoff, right? Bowl games, traditional bowl games, just get absorbed into the 16-team playoff. Obviously, the FCS level has been able to pull this off to some degree of success, and I think those who really follow that level understand, yeah, there are plenty of issues with that too. So that's my main initial reaction. The main reasoning for it is 16. Why 16? But we've struggled in college football to get to 4. And then I thought that the 12 thing was going to happen. It made a lot of sense. We just create 8 more teams. You still got 4, the top 4 that fight for a bye. That makes a lot of sense to me for the sanctity of the regular season, to be over dramatic. But now 16? Ooh, whoa. What's going on here? How do we get to 16? I always thought the Steve Spurrier line of eventually getting to 8. And I was surprised that the 12 team one popped out as well. Maybe there's some kind of master plan just to get to 8, and to get there you gotta go 12 first to butter them up, and knowing that thing's going to get denied, and then just trump that and go to 16. Let's talk about that, and then slide the old sucker punch 8 in there. That was the goal the whole time. Maybe that's somebody's grand plan. Maybe that does happen behind closed doors or on phone calls between Ohio State's athletic director and Alabama's athletic director, or whoever. Maybe Greg Sankey and Kevin Warren are on the phone coordinating this. I find that hard to believe, though. But are you one of those people? Because I know a lot of college football fans are. Are you one that has to have a certain number, that really believes college football, a national champion should be decided by X number of teams in a playoff? If you are, I'd love to hear your argument. Love to. Because the way that things have changed so much here recently with the name, image, and likeness stuff. I mean, you guys probably saw the video yesterday, the social media video. Spencer Rattler walks in street clothes into smoke, and then the video morphs into him emerging from the smoke in the Gamecock uniform with the football. And I think that the heading was a man who needs no introduction kind of thing. Spencer Rattler, a guy who was favored to win the Heisman Trophy this time last year, is now a South Carolina Gamecock. That's a massive shift in college football. The fact that that's happened. The transfer portal. We're going to unlimited transfers here soon. College football has undergone major changes. I thought the next change was going to be SEC schedule changes, getting rid of the divisions, going to what I think they'll still go to, assuming 16 teams is where they cap it, a 3-6-6 type model where you get 3 permanent opponents and rotate the other 6 every other year. Basically, ensuring that you have the ability, your team is going to go to every school in the conference at least once every 4 years. Makes a lot of sense to me. Let's see what you guys have to say. Start at 12, RL says, to get to 8. Does that mean you the art of the deal, he's saying? Gotcha. Exactly. That's what it seems like to me. 8 seems like a really good number. 16 seems kind of ridiculous. The idea of 12 is really interesting to me too. But 16 seems like too much. I understand a lot of people think 8 is way too much. I guess some people think 4. They would rather see the old BCS model. Troy says, I'm fine with 8 or maybe 12. No more than that, though. Scared of watering down the regular season. And I know that's the knee-jerk thing, and I'm trying to break that down. Because I don't think that's ever happened. Clearly, the NFL handles it okay, right? We see it every now and again. I mean, we see it every year to some degree that the best teams in the NFL have locked down home field advantage, number 1 seed, with a few games left sometimes. Sometimes just 1 game. And yet everything still turns out just fine because we pay attention to everything else that week, right? There's still plenty more tension, plenty more question marks to be determined. Isn't that just what we would do in college football? I mean, and in college football, you have the rivalries added in. So if Alabama's already locked up a spot in the playoff, I mean, which I feel like by and large we've already seen in the last several years sometimes. We've certainly seen it with Clemson. If South Carolina was going to upset them and give them their first loss of the year, a lot of these years, that wasn't going to keep them out of the championship, out of the college football playoff, was it? I guess possibly. Now that hasn't happened in reality, so we don't have to. That hasn't been real. That hasn't been a thing. So no need to get into that too much. That hypothetical. But I've never gotten the feeling at the end of the NFL season, the regular season, like, oh, I don't want to watch football today because the postseason outcome has already been determined by so many teams. Even though a lot of times that last Sunday, there isn't a whole lot to be determined. It's still football, man. And rivalry football in college is a different thing. I don't think you're ever going to see guys not. I mean, what we saw Brian Edwards sitting out of the Clemson game for South Carolina a couple of years ago, as I'm going through this, saying that I don't think you'll ever see guys just sit out and decide not to play in a rivalry game, and I'm seeing Brian Edwards on the sideline and being cheered for when his name went up on the Jumbotron, or his picture did. He was dealing with some injuries and had an NFL career to factor in and didn't play in a rivalry game that was massively uneven going in. So maybe that's the concern, right? Alabama and Auburn won't be Alabama and Auburn because Alabama's already got a playoff spot lined up and they don't want to get people hurt. I don't see that happening. So what is it about 16 teams that I automatically kind of bristle at? I don't know. Maybe it's the years and years of watching number one teams just pound teams that can't quite compete, and that's usually, I mean, that's most of them usually in college football, right? But certainly 16, I get it. You see upsets all the time, and there are plenty of examples, I'm sure, of unranked teams knocking off the top 5 teams, part of what we love in college football. But to have that consistently, or to have that setup, you don't want the playoff to have more uneven games. I think it's probably what I'm concerned about. And having seen as many uneven, uncompetitive semifinal games as we've seen in the college football playoff, I don't want that to be increased, to happen more often, and for the college football postseason to be watered down any more than it already has. So just talking it out now, I think that's exactly my concern with a number like 16. Having said that, we all love the college basketball tournament with 64 teams, with seeing a number 16 seed pull the upset against a team that would go on to win the national championship the next year, Maryland, Baltimore County. But knowing that had never happened beforehand, and most of those games are blowouts, and just the nature of basketball and football is so different, right? You're not playing 2 football games in a weekend. 6 games is what you got to win in the NCAA basketball tournament to win a national championship. That's not fair. I don't think anybody wants to see anything close to that. So what would it be when you're 16? Be 4? You got to win 4 games? That seems a little excessive. And I don't see that happening with the conference championship games, bringing in the money they do, being signed up for what they're signed up for. So that's why 12 even was a surprise. But when you can take 4 out of that, give them a bye, and it's kind of a glorified quarterfinal system, got to win 3 games for the national championship. All right, it's just 1 more than we got now, right? You would have to win 4 if you're a 9 through 12 seed. I get that, which would be a great story, and I think we'd all love it. But that's when you're getting into to me, player safety type issues with that many more games added. And I think that's part of where my head's at with 16, maybe, when that came up yesterday. But the FCS has been able to do that for forever. When they play at their home venues as well, I think that is something that we haven't seen and something worth considering for sure. I like that being part of the discussion for an expanded college football playoff, because the corporate antiseptic neutral site venues, that is not what college football is all about. Now, having said that, it reminds me of the Georgia-Florida conversation now. And I know Kirby Smart that's been part of his talking points. His offseason message is kind of campaigning to get that cocktail party gone in Jacksonville. And from his standpoint, I can understand it, because you can't bring recruits to that game, whether you're Georgia or Florida. That's the NCAA rule. I think the easy Counterpoint to that is, all right, well, let's just change that rule, man. You guys get to bring in whatever you need, a few hundred. You get a few hundred tickets for recruits. Florida gets a few hundred tickets for recruits. There you go. It's a different type recruiting experience for sure, but Georgia, Florida is different. It's always been different. Jacksonville is unique. It's part of what makes college football great. The uniqueness of it, how it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. Who doesn't love a world's largest cocktail party? But in college football, we don't seem to use that common sense very often because that would be way too easy. That would require someone to be the adult in the room, to come in, say, all right, here's what we're going to do. And we know this is not going to make you 100% happy. But this is the best path moving forward. Sorry. And then it always seems to come down to the bottom line, right? And that's what this is for Kirby Smart, who understands dominating in recruiting is his path to continue to dominate college football. So you add a recruiting weekend in, you add doing that against Florida every other year, that only helps your operation. So that I totally understand his argument and why he's doing that. Is it good for college football is the question. And the easy answer there is no. It's good for Kirby Smart in Georgia. But until we get someone in charge of college football, that's what it's going to continue to be. Everyone pulling for their own individual school or conference interests. And I'm afraid we're getting to a point in college football where those interests are getting so powerful, so strong, that we could be getting to that place that kind of Kirk Ferentz was talking about yesterday, where this is getting to a place that he has not seen in his coaching career at 67 years old, where somebody needs to step in and make it much more calm across the board. And I think he was mainly talking from a name, image, and likeness standpoint, but that's just the latest. But even as I say that, college football programs have been powerful in the spectrum of college sports for a long, long time, and here we are. The game is as big as it's ever been, making as much money as it ever has. But the experience has changed in the last several years. The attendance numbers have, if not declined, which I think they have slightly, they certainly have plateaued. And we're not where we once were, where college football stadiums in general, just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, trying to pack more and more people in there because the interest seemingly is infinite. Television has changed that. Now, the television money has changed a bunch too. So they've kind of gone hand in hand, but the reorganization in college football is happening before our eyes, right? And it has been now for a while with expanded conferences, but especially the Southern Cal and UCLA thing with the Big Ten. And now you hear Kevin Warren yesterday saying, it may continue to expand. Still a handful of teams out there that can add value. Well, when I start hearing people talk like that, and that's certainly how Greg Sankey has talked as well, that was why Texas A&M was added to the SEC, Missouri as well. You're talking about adding TV markets when the Big Ten has the three largest ones. Rutgers, I guess, tangentially there with New York, Chicago, and LA now. It's a different deal, but I worry that while those power brokers are all about the money and all about those big picture items, no one's in the room saying, hey, man, what about the college football fan? What about the price of a ticket or taking a family to a game and then growing that next generation of fans? Because I've said it before, man, my kids, I've taken them to a handful of games. I think they enjoy them, but it's just different than it was, I know, when I was a kid growing up, because of the experience they get on Saturdays without going to games. Not that nothing has changed that much going to a game. It's still special and still has all the pageantry. Now it's even more comfortable, right? Better bathrooms, more air-conditioned areas, more options from a concession standpoint, all of that stuff. But that pales in comparison to how much the stay-at-home experience has improved for us in college football. We get to watch pretty much anything. And they're typically almost every Saturday delivers in some way. If you're sitting on your couch, you can find something worth watching real quick. And a lot of times it's multiple things going on at one time. And even at home with the remote control, I can't keep up. You got to DVR some other games and go back and look at them, or definitely catch the highlights and the whole thing. But and to do that in relative real time is a much different experience than going to a game, looking at your phone, seeing a score maybe in real time, but then not knowing, not experiencing those live moments on TV, at least, with kind of everybody else at the same time. And that's the main competition that a bunch of these college football programs are fighting right now. Again, being in the stadium, a part of 70+ thousand people, is still a tremendous experience, and I think will always be. There's something that just we connect with as human beings there. And college football does it better than any other experience, I think. The band, the traditions, the tailgating, and the SEC, we all know. But also, when you're doing that, there is a little bit of missing out. You are trading off something there a lot of Saturdays, especially if your team isn't playing a marquee opponent. It's a much larger trade-off, right? There is some sense in my head of I'm missing a bunch. Like, I'm happy I'm here, but I'm also feeling like I'm missing a bunch. That the FOMO. I'm not a fear of missing out kind of guy in general, but I definitely have gotten that more and more with college football through the years, just because of how much the experience has improved sitting on my couch with the remote control. So the future of college football, maybe you guys aren't some of those I've talked to through the years who are really adamant about numbers, but if you are, would love to hear it, because I don't have it in my head. I always have been a proponent of more is better from a college football playoff standpoint. A playoff is a good thing. More teams deserve a shot at a national championship. You should never go undefeated and not be able to win a championship. That makes no sense to me. Completely un-American, just against the competitive spirit, right? Herm Edwards, you play to win the game. Well, if you won all the games, then you should be the champ. And to have a system set up where it's not like that is ridiculous to me. So was pleased that we at least have a system that could get a Cincinnati in a college football playoff, where Cincinnati would have never had a chance to even sniff a national championship, I think, in previous eras. Or maybe they would have been voted a co-national champion, and we all would have been like, hey, man, we get it. They were undefeated, and they had a great season, but we also watched their games, and they won a few of those just barely, and we know who those teams were they played, and that doesn't make sense. We need to see it on the field. So to see it on the field is what this comes down to me. I guess my concern with growing to 16 for a college football playoff is that we're going to see things on the field that we don't want to see. We don't want to see big-time players getting hurt trying to win a fourth game for a national championship. You don't want to see more blowouts by top-ranked teams who are clearly just better than other programs, and that to be kind of the accepted routine with a college football playoff for a couple of rounds. You're just going to get that, because it's almost been accepted now in the semifinal round of just a 14 playoff that, on paper, sure, this opponent deserves to play the other opponent, but we rarely see that work out in reality. So I'm a more is better typically kind of guy, but I guess this is with an asterisk in college football right now. And I think, obviously, a lot of what is being done right now, from the Big Ten expanding, the SEC taking Texas and Oklahoma, does factor into this college football playoff, where it's the pot of gold at the end of the college sports rainbow in a lot of ways. So much money's involved. So interested to see how that works out, and the conversation continues to evolve. York weighing in with a UFA fan. Good morning. Good morning to you too, sir. You got a number, York, for national championship playoff, for a college football playoff that you want to see or don't see? Maybe that's the easier question to answer. What's the number you don't want to see for sure? There was something just about that 16 conversation yesterday when Ohio State athletic director Gene Smith put that out there up at the Big Ten Media Days. York goes with 12. I think that's the number he does want to see. And I think I'm good with that. I never thought I would be. I always thought we would end up at 8 and stay there. Remember Steve Spurrier kind of throwing 8 out there as well. I thought it was going to expand from the BCS to 8. I thought that was going to be the original playoff, because 4 isn't much of a playoff, right? Yeah, York says 8 or 12, no more. Anthony says, wouldn't mind 8 or 12, don't want to see 16. Because I think that's what's in my head. Like, when you're playing something off, you need to do it a few times. Twice isn't much of a playoff. You got to win 2 games. Like, okay. Yeah, so it looks like our consensus is 12, right? It still does a tremendous job in keeping a high value in the regular season. Being a top 4 seed will get you a bye. Still, if you're one of the best 15 teams in the country, and it will just, if it happens, give us a different set of issues, right? First of all, there'll probably be controversy about the 4 teams, maybe teams 3 and 4 getting in over teams 5 and 6 for buys. Then teams 13, 14, and 15, maybe more, will be complaining they didn't get in as one of those members in the 12. I get it. And we all understand. We're not saying it's going to be perfect. We're just looking for the next iteration of the college football playoff, knowing that it's going to grow. It's got to. yeah, I'm trying to go through in my head and troubleshoot the issues that would pop up. And I would imagine that those 4 teams that end up getting the bye in a proposed 12-team playoff would have an enhanced percentage chance to win a national championship. First of all, they're just the best 4 teams throughout the season. Makes sense, right? Then they have to play one less game in the playoff. But the idea of a team 5 through 12 playing their best football at that time of year, and we've seen it in the NFL multiple times where wild card teams roll through the Super Bowl, and no one after the season says, yeah, they weren't really the best team. No, they just decided and just won it on the field. We saw it. So the idea of that being able to happen, to me, is fantastic, is worth some trade-off for sure. York says, interestingly, we lost sight of the fact we want the best 2 teams playing for the title. 8 or 12 should have the best 2 if they survive. I don't know if we lost that fact. I mean, isn't that that's what we've gotten pretty well in the college football playoff. I don't necessarily want that. Is that what the Super Bowl is every year? I don't think so. I think a lot of times the best 2 teams end up playing in a conference championship game. Who was it? Was it the Chiefs and Ravens a couple of years ago? Tremendous game. Chiefs and Patriots. Yeah, Team 69 complains in basketball now, no doubt. I mean, more than that, right? Team 69 through 79, I think at least complain in basketball. But I got no sympathy for them, or very little sympathy for them a lot of times. I do feel bad for the mid-majors who have really good seasons and don't win their conference tournaments and don't get a chance. What I want, and I've never thought of it as wanting the best 2 teams to play for a national title. I want a national champion to earn it on the field. And if that comes by having the best game in a quarterfinal or semifinal game, I'm good with that because they still earned it on the field. I don't think we have to ask of a playoff procedure that the best game ends up being the last game all the time, because the matchups in college football just don't work like that. Right? That Georgia-Oklahoma Rose Bowl with Baker Mayfield several years ago, absolutely tremendous. Fortunately, that year it didn't take away. I think that was the same year that Tua Tagovailoa came in and ended up giving us an overtime winner in the college football playoff final as well. Yeah, Troy, I complained about NC State in baseball. Yeah, and it was a legit complaint because we saw the other team that got in with a similar type resume in Ole Miss go on and win the national championship. So a great example of no matter what happens, it's going to be far from perfect. But instead of concentrating on all the negative stuff that will happen, instead of deciding it almost from a scared perspective that way, I always go the other way. Like, all right, what are the big benefits though? And we can definitely get those to outweigh any of the negatives, man. And the NCAA basketball tournament, even the baseball tournament, great examples of that, right? That Ole Miss run, fantastic. You don't have that if you don't have a 64-team tournament. They were one of the last few in. In baseball, that rarely happens, but we've seen it happen before. We've seen even 4 seeds go on to win a national championship. We saw Coastal Carolina go on to win the national championship not too long ago. The mid-majors. So would love to see some type of similar story in college football where we don't see that. And unfortunately, we've seen the list shrink instead of the field of national championship contenders expand. And maybe from the SEC perspective, you can make the argument when you have 3 past national champions, all 3 different teams, that at least there is some parity there. That's a pretty good track record. You can't get better than that, right? 3 for 3 with LSU, Alabama, and Georgia. But in the Big Ten, you got Ohio State, and then you got who? From a college football playoff standpoint. Michigan's not holding up their end of the bargain there. That has been disappointing, I think, in this college football playoff era. The Pac-12, what has it been since 2015, 2016, since Washington got in, and not really a factor. Oregon's played for a couple of national championships. Southern Cal has let a lot of people down, I think, when it comes to being able to compete for a national championship year in and year out. One of the reasons Lincoln Riley's got the job, right? Big 12, Oklahoma's been there, hadn't been able to figure it out in the last several years. That's where you got to give Clemson some credit, man. That is where it could completely be without them, an SEC narrative dominating college football, and Clemson has kept it from being that. But that's where they get the criticism about being able to kind of cruise up until that point when we put up the ACC preseason poll, and we'll do that in just a second. Kind of reset things this morning first. I know we're past the first hour mark, but this thing is so ridiculous. I put it up on the video version of the show. The split screen of Aaron Rodgers and Nick Cage from Con Air, and that's how Rodgers showed up to Green Bay Packers training camp yesterday. I would just love to know. I don't think he's mentioned how this went down. I'm a fan, by the way, of Aaron Rodgers. I'm a fan. And it's not just because of the vaccine stuff. I wasn't a fan of him saying that he was immunized and being shady with that. But I'm a fan of watching him play, the way he handles everything, playing with a chip on the shoulder and confident, bordering on cocky, and then how cerebral he is and thinking about things. And I know he is off-putting to a lot of people. I get it. He's a different dude. I like different in this case for sure, in a lot of ways. And maybe I'm completely biased coming at it from some Packer fandom, having become a Green Bay Packer fan back in the old Sterling Sharp days. Robert Brooks continuing that from the South Carolina perspective, and then Brett Favre made it easy to be a Packer fan in a lot of ways. But I appreciate Aaron Rodgers being ridiculous yesterday and just seeing like the response it got. In a lot of ways, that was kind of his version, I feel like, of Shane Beamer and South Carolina's video that they did headed to SEC Media Days. Just in a much different way, right? I'm all for that. In sports in general, man, they're games. Have fun with it. Don't take yourself so seriously. Speaking of that, wanted to play a clip for you. That's why I love having our guests here on the program. You always get a bunch of good stories. One of the best ones we've heard actually was from baseball. I want you to, if you've already heard it, certainly worth hearing again. If you haven't heard it, it is fantastic. This is our buddy Stuart Lake, former Gamecock assistant, Charleston Southern head coach, an Ole Miss assistant. This happened from his time back at Ole Miss, where they went to go play a game at Georgia, and the hecklers took it to a whole new level there at Georgia. And apparently it's something that they've done before, as a bit of a tradition out there. So Stuart Lake taking us through that. You can watch his combination. He's got more heckling stories as well. I've got that separated on our YouTube channel in the show segments, and a bunch of different guests in there for you as well for your viewing pleasure. Please go and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not already. Appreciate you being a part of the show today. Plenty more to come right after this. We'll reset with ACC Media Days and everything that came from Clemson being picked to win that sucker for the 7th time in 8 years. Gamecock preseason hype to get to. Your comments. Plenty more coming up right after this heckling story from Stuart Lake.
Ed Anderson played for us at College of Charleston. Brett still lives in Charleston. He's got a great career. He laughs because I love telling this story. Well, we go to play Georgia. College of Charleston, we're going to play a Tuesday night and a Wednesday afternoon game. And Brett was really good. This was that Brett Gardner was on the team. We had a really good team. We go in, and in right field at Georgia, they used to all sit on that hill before they kind of ran all the frat out of there to some way. And they're just yelling the most personal things, like a girlfriend's name, his pet's name, his best. I mean, things that I'm going, there must be your best friend goes to Georgia and sold you out. So he came in the dugout, and after about 3 innings, he is clearly rattled. He was our middle of lineup hitter. Coach Pulowski ended up taking him out of the game. He had gotten so rattled by their fans. And when we get back to the hotel that night, I go around to do room check. And I go in his room, and he actually roomed with Brett Gardner. They were roommates at home and on the road and everything. And Brett Gardner is laughing like a child. And I said, what's so funny? He goes, we just found out how they know all that stuff that they just did. And they called him BA. He said, now we know. I said, what happened? Well, a heckler had called his mom and told him that Brett had won an award, and they just made up this elaborate, and she did over an hour interview with the heckler on the phone. She had no idea it had anything to do with Georgia, anything. His mom called that night, because this was back before games were on TV, and called and said, hey, they're going to get you while you're there. You've won a prestigious baseball award. So the poor kid now is just laughing like, Mom, you told them my nickname as a child. You told them our pet's name. You told them my high school girlfriend's name. Why would you have ever thought they needed to know all that? And she's like, he was so nice. The young man doing the thing to present this to you was so nice.
Fantastic. Stuart Lake. Love that story. I screwed up the setup. Was when he was at the College of Charleston as an assistant. Not Ole Miss, but I think you get the gist for sure. Right now, wanted to let you know about one of our sponsors here on the program, Freedom Primary Care. Freedom Primary Care is up in Fort Mill near where I live, but they've got plenty of telemedicine options for you. We're in the 21st century, man, and that means a lot of different things when it comes to healthcare, and has certainly changed the way that I look at healthcare here recently, and made me value being able to make my own healthcare choices, which I never thought would be an issue in my lifetime, but it has become an issue recently. And Freedom Primary Care puts a high value on your freedom as well. They're responsible to you. They're not responsible for you. And that falls right in line with my philosophy of health for sure. And the thing that I value maybe most about Freedom Primary Care, and have seen since they're taking care of my family, is that they can present to you if you're more natural minded and want to go that route of care, or if you want to go the more traditional, maybe conservative route, then you can go that way as well. You have options with Freedom Primary Care. They're a comprehensive primary care facility where you're in charge of your health, affordable memberships, natural solutions. Go check them out. Give them a call at 803-627-2447. That's Freedom Primary Care. Appreciate them being a sponsor of this program. Please help support those who support the show. Appreciate your support as well as we roll into the final 45 minutes or so of the program this morning. And college football going to continue to dominate the conversation as it typically does here on the show. ACC Media Days, no big surprise that Clemson is the dominant leader of ACC kickoff. I wanted to go to just the overall votes to win the ACC championship this year, and Clemson favored to do it for the 7th time in the last 8 years, getting 103 votes to win it. NC State second at 38, and then it's just single-digit votes. Miami being the most there. They're predicted to win the other side, the other division there that will go away soon. NC State picked to finish second in the Atlantic Division. Wake third, Louisville fourth. It's the 5th-place teams here that really stand out to me in the ACC preseason media poll. Florida State in Clemson's division in the Atlantic. And over in the Coastal, I think it's more surprising. I don't know if it's more, because Florida State, in my mind, will always be Bobby Bowden and a top 5 finish for whatever it was, ridiculous, 13 consecutive years. But Virginia Tech picked to finish 5th in the Coastal. Man, I mean, especially with the Coastal being what it is. The Coastal, to me, right now is the SEC East minus Georgia. And in a weaker version. I don't know. Maybe it's very similar as I continue to look at those programs, except if you have North Carolina 3rd, well, the last time we saw North Carolina with Sam Howell, the Gamecocks ran them out of the building. And Carolina's picked to finish 5th in the East this year. But Virginia Tech down at 5th in the Coastal Division, I am a fan of what Mario Cristobal is doing at Miami. I think he will get them back to being much more relevant in college football on a regular basis. They have the opportunity to get back to being top 15-ish, top 10-ish relevant, I think, by next year. I think this year might be a bit of a stretch. But there are a lot of ifs that Miami still has to answer. There are a lot of hurdles they still got to jump over to get there. Pitt's a solid program, but I think Pitt and Kentucky are pretty similar these days. Pitt and Tennessee, I know they play, week 3, I think, this year. That's going to be a fascinating game. So just to do the SEC East comparison. Because outside of this, I mean, who else would you vote for to win the ACC? I guess is my question. And the fact that Clemson didn't make it 7 in a row last year, looking at this list, is pretty fascinating. And now Clemson is at a place where we've never seen it before. Coming off a less than dominant season in the ACC for the first time in a while. And doing that after going on a run they've never gone on before. Yeah, they used to win ACC championships all the time back in the day. They won the national title. But they didn't do it like they've done it recently. They have been dominant. They're the overwhelming favorite again this year. And they're doing it with the same quarterback who struggled last year. And this year, the narrative from Dabo Swinney has simply been sophomore slump. Was really good his freshman year. We have confidence. He can be the guy. He's got all the tools and the whole thing. I understand the narrative too. Travis Etienne, a really good player, he left, and that really hurt his quarterback. Wide receivers, not quite the same around him. I get it. But at some point, that conversation comes back to the quarterback. At some point, you can only point around you until that finger's got to come right back to your chest. You can only do it so many times. And in college football, is there an example? I don't know if there is an example of a guy coming in to a situation like DJ Uiagalelei, where you're clearly set up to continue a run of not just being one of the best college football programs in the country, but also being a quarterback factory to some degree, having one of the best quarterbacks in the country after Deshaun Watson, after Trevor Lawrence. There it is for you, DJ. You go ahead. And it looked like he was going to go ahead with a couple of good games as a freshman. And the program still set up with the recruiting numbers, and there was nothing that signified to anybody, I don't think, this time last year. Maybe there is some genius out there who went all in on the under for Clemson's win total last year in the regular season, who foresaw that 4-3 start. but I don't know of anybody. And typically, if there are any media nerds doing that, they're loud and obnoxious, and we know about it real quick. We know about it often. To signify to us this time last year that we were going to see what we saw. And a lot of the blame, I think in this case, fairly falls on the shoulders of Clemson's quarterback. Now, it certainly wasn't the main issue. I mean, certainly wasn't the only issue, I should say, but it was the main issue. And to not have, from the outside looking in, like an alternate plan or to make a move to keep that from happening again this year, that is a big time gamble in my mind, especially in this age of the transfer portal. Like, how many solid quarterbacks could Clemson have brought in to at least be a fallback option to push him this time, in a week or two in preseason camp, to be a safety valve? I mean, that's where we're getting to in college football, isn't it? Especially with name, image, and likeness now. Say, hey, you got a really talented quarterback. Great. What happens if that doesn't work out? And, I mean, I'm talking about even at programs where you've got a really good player, like the other quarterbacks in the ACC. DJ Uyunglele is not in the top 5 list in his own conference right now at his position. And that, after Trevor Lawrence, I mean, how much money would you have gotten from that bet this time last year or the year before, especially? You got NC State, you got Wake Forest. I think Pitt feels good about who they got replacing Kenny Pickett with. Miami feels good about their quarterback situation. So many teams across the ACC go into 2022 feeling better at their quarterback position than Clemson. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. It does fit Dabo Swinney's personality to a T, right? To say, nope, not changing. He's our guy. He can do it. He's got all the talent in the world. The problem is he didn't do it. And you can make you can explain that away all you want to. But at the end of the day, that has to change drastically. And clearly the experts, the analysts, those that project these things are expecting that to happen to some degree, but also you're not seeing love for Clemson's quarterback like you have. I mean, you can go back to certainly Taj Boyd before Deshaun Watson dominating the ACC. Is this his third year there? Second year starting? RL, that is correct for DJU. It's the second year. It's his team is how I see it. And Troy being the resident Clemson fan, mentioned how DJ played well in a couple of games for Trevor Lawrence when he had COVID issues now a couple of seasons ago. And yeah, that's the crazy part of this, right? That is the mystery to me of, again, why we still saw what we saw last year consistently. Also, what makes me kind of respect Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, Taj Boyd, throw him in there as well, how consistent they were, how consistently good they were. Game in, game out. And not just good, I mean, great. We're talking best in the country, what Oklahoma's quarterbacks had done until Spencer Rattler struggled a little bit on that run. So it's not even close. And I mentioned it, I didn't plan on it, but it's not even close from a quarterback-centric standpoint every single season. Whoever's playing quarterback at Clemson, whoever's playing quarterback at the University of South Carolina, going to be talked about a ton, scrutinized a ton, criticized a ton, praised a ton as well when things go right, criticized when they go wrong. But I don't know if we've ever seen a season like this. I cannot remember a season like this, because that definitely hasn't been the case for a South Carolina quarterback since when? I guess you could say maybe Jake Bentley coming off that record-setting performance in the 21-point loss to Clemson, and that was going into year number 3, right? He was definitely being projected as an NFL type guy out there. Let's remember, I'm not saying that he should have been or that was accurate or the whole thing. I'm just reporting here for you. That's what it was then. He was being projected as an NFL type guy, having had at that point come in midway through a freshman season where he still could have been in high school, winning 4 out of 6 regular season games, kind of saving the Gamecock season at the time was how we looked at it, and then leading Carolina back against Michigan in that Outback Bowl to a win. And having, I think it was that game before, thrown for the record-setting amount of yards against a Clemson team that would go on to either win for the national championship or play for it that year. I forget. These things get a little muddled in my mind. And so clearly he was being talked about very well then. And I think this was even Deshaun Watson's final year going in. Might have been Trevor Lawrence's first, but I think it was Deshaun Watson's last. But Clemson wasn't coming on. The Clemson quarterback situation was clear then. Really, really good. And we hadn't seen a crack in what Clemson had done. Going back to the Chad Morris-led era with Taj Boyd. Whoever played quarterback at Clemson since then been really, really good, and the offense had been one of the best in the country. Not the case this year, surprisingly. And on the flip side, you got the Gamecock quarterback situation, which I mentioned to you guys yesterday. Watching QB1 on Netflix, almost done with that. Didn't finish it last night. Watched Bill Burr instead. Oh, that's funny. Fan of Bill Burr. Recommend it. So I'll give you the complete version of my QB1 review coming up when I finish that show. And interested to hear your thoughts if you watch that. But I'm just trying to figure out trying to add that in to who Spencer Rattler is, and then what we might expect from him this year, because, man, I got no idea. If you went to that bowl game like I did and watched Dakereon Joyner go 9 for 9, I was rewatching it the other night a little bit as well, and still shaking my head as it's happening. Watch Zeb Nolan be successful and keep that offense moving, scoring a bunch of points. I get it. I think it was a depleted North Carolina defense. I think one of their linebackers especially was out for the second half of the season. RL, don't start, man. Your thoughts on Bill Burr's take on WNBA support. Hilarious. And I think that's where the conversation should start and end, with comedians' takes, by the way, most of the time. I mean, the really good ones, and Burr is certainly at the top of that list, not only are hilarious and make you laugh at it, but then make you think like, oh yeah, that's true to a large degree. I'm not sure about this one. I don't give much thought on the WNBA stuff there. So let's not get into that, especially when we're talking Carolina and Clemson quarterbacks this year, because the Jake Bentley era was definitely notable and dramatic in a lot of ways, right? I mean, I'll never forget asking Will Muschamp at his press conference how is your team dealing with uncertainty at quarterback coming off a bye week where they had still gone Brandon McElwain and Perry Orth at that point, and Jake Bentley had been redshirted. And in classic Will Muschamp fashion, he's like, "Oh, our team knows who our quarterback is. There's no uncertainty there." Jake Bentley hadn't played it down. Hadn't played a second in college football. And you're going to give us that. Okay. And then it turned out to be what it did. Maybe a larger sample size of the trend that we've seen from DJ Uiagalelei, unfortunately for DJU and Jake, right? Started pretty well. Was going up and then kindly maybe plateaued, but probably if you look at the numbers, the production dipped. And I never thought we'd see Jake Bentley end his college career at South Alabama where he did. I thought the transfer to Utah was going to be a good move. One of those where you could say, all right, good for him getting out of kind of a toxic situation. You had Ryan Helinski coming back at the time. Again, revisionist history. We can see it now, but at the time it looked like, oh, this is going to be Ryan Helinski's team, man. Got thrown in the fire as a freshman. Boy, things are going to change for a guy who came in from California, big-time reputation, and showed that he could throw the football against Alabama and the whole thing. And obviously that didn't work out from the Gamecock perspective either. So there's been plenty of, I guess, drama around the quarterback position recently from the South Carolina standpoint, but never quite like this. Never nationally. Nobody cared about the South Carolina quarterback position outside of maybe the SEC, and I think that's being kind with Jake Bentley and Ryan Helinski because they didn't prove it enough on the field. Maybe that third season with Bentley, and that was the start against North Carolina, right? And Sam Howell, where the foot injury happened, and then the season was lost. And then Helinski was thrust in and the whole thing. So dramatic year for sure. But since then, it's just kind of been rough, I think is the fair way to put it. And now you got Spencer Rattler rolling in. And yesterday's smoke-filled hype video, all part of it. He's been, I think I look at Rattler in a similar way as I do Steve Spurrier from the way that we kind of perceive him, a reputation of being a bit of I think cocky is a fair word to apply. And that's certainly part of the perception of QB1 that I get there. But a guy that earned the right to be that way because of a bunch of success, right? Rattler set the record of the state of Arizona high school quarterbacks for passing yards and was the number one quarterback coming out in high school, going to Oklahoma, and had success, won a Big 12 title, and then got beat out. And now is at South Carolina, and you're hearing the narrative from Shane Beamer, right? And maybe he saved this one in his hip pocket for a reason. I don't know. Maybe it just has come up organically about the Jalen Hurts situation. I don't feel like we heard that originally. Maybe that was Shane's plan to kind of keep that one in the hip pocket and then get to it when he knew the preseason hype would be building and the whole thing. But didn't bring him to SEC Media Days, which I think was probably a smart move. As long as the three players, especially Dakereon Joyner, were properly prepped about how frequently they would be asked about him or were cool with it. As long as he kind of cleared that, I would think that's what you would want to do. Like, hey, man, Dakereon Joyner, Really appreciate your loyalty, everything you mean to the team. You're an important part. You're a great face of the program. We want to bring you to SEC Media Days. Here's the deal, though. We're not bringing Spencer Rattler, and you're going to get asked about Spencer Rattler a bunch of times. You okay with that? I'm guessing that's kind of how it went down. You good with that? Is that going to work for you? And maybe that's not quite how it goes. Maybe it was, hey, you're coming to SEC Media Days. That decision has been made. Congratulations. And here's how we want you to answer the Spencer Rattler questions. Maybe that's how it went down. I don't know. But obviously, topic number one in Shane Beamer's year number 2, because of where he sat this time last year, the Heisman favorite at what just had become a Heisman Trophy factory with Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray at quarterback, Jalen Hurts as a finalist as well. But now Shane Beamer using that story to give the perspective that Spencer Rattler brings to South Carolina with him, having watched Jalen Hurts come in from Alabama, having been in the quarterback room as a true freshman when Jalen Hurts transferred in, won the job, won over the team, went on to have a really good season. Obviously would be best case scenario. But I think fairly, Jalen Hurts had proven more during his college career at that point than Spencer Rattler has proven. Now, Rattler's got some good numbers. Not going to deny that. And there is a reason why a lot of people I've seen as high as number 2 in the SEC from a quarterback ranking perspective. Trying to think the other names that have popped up there. And I think the only one is the returning Heisman Trophy winner at Alabama that was above one list that I saw about SEC quarterbacks, and that made me raise my eyebrows. And a lot of these preseason lists are designed to do that, so I take them all with a grain of salt. But, I mean, plenty of other quarterbacks out there that have reasons to be excited going in. KJ Jefferson at Arkansas is one of the first that pops to mind. Anthony Richardson's got a lot to prove at Florida for sure, but seems to come in with kind of all the talent in the world, and Florida has a track record of high-producing quarterbacks for sure. Let's see, in the East, Will Levis, I know Kentucky quarterback, is a bit of a lightning rod in preseason discussions. The Penn State transfer, pretty good season last year. But his projection as far as being an NFL guy or whether he's not an NFL guy, that's where I've seen the most strong takes one way or the other. And Tennessee, Hendon Hooker, the season he had last year, that to me is where I have a hard time seeing Spencer Rattler so high up on the list of SEC quarterbacks, especially knowing what the quarterback position produced for South Carolina in year number 1 under Marcus Satterfield. And maybe that's unfair, but I don't think it is in what college football is these days. Hendon Hooker was also a first-year quarterback in his system, right? Josh Heupel, that was their first year last year. And you look at their personnel, you look at South Carolina's personnel, there was not a ton of difference going in last year. And, man, what that offense did, those numbers, tremendous. And so I give Tennessee, Josh Heupel, especially the bulk of the credit, but Hendon Hooker deserves a lot as well. As it made me choke up. It was so special coming off as a Tennessee homer there. Spidey weighing in this morning says, good morning to all of you. See if I can get his comment up there. I haven't been here in a while. Busy with life. Good to see Tim Hill. Thanks, man. And agrees with me. The Bill Burr special, fire. Good to hear from you, Spidey, on the YouTube live stream. Love to hear your thoughts. Mostly this morning, been talking about college football. The comment yesterday from Ohio State Athletics Director Gene Smith about how the conversation, the talk of 16 teams being in a playoff is out there. You got a number? But I'm not one of those guys that has a number. You want to tell me that 6 is the ideal college football playoff? I'll listen. I guess anything more than 4 right now, I will listen to. If you're adamant that it has to stay at 4, I'm not hating on you. It wouldn't crush me if that's where college football decides to stay. If that's what it comes down to, if that's how they figure out basically where they're making the most money, which is unfortunately how this is done. So as long as you're just not defining what you want by here's how you make the most money, and you're doing it as here's how we get to have the most exciting or fair ideally fair system for deciding a national champion, I'm all in. Yeah, I can be convinced. I'm open to it. But 12 seems to be the consensus number of teams that we've heard. 8 or 12 from a lot of people, and then 12 from others seems to be the most popular. So I'm kind of that vein as well, because a playoff to me has to be more than 2 games. It's not really a playoff. Like a 1-game playoff, that's like a sudden death kind of thing. 2 games to me, in my mind, that's not a playoff system. That's just a +1. So to me, it's got to be 8 kind of to even qualify. Spidey says expanding it to the point it's an NFL playoff system, ideal, to be honest. And see, that's where the traditionalist in me is like, wait a second. All right. I love the NFL playoffs. And that's one of the main differences, right? We never hear in the NFL, well, the best team didn't win the Super Bowl, because we just saw them win the Super Bowl. They proved they were the best team on the field. Now, no one cares in the NFL. Well, they weren't the best team for the whole year. That's not a thing, because they've always had the playoffs. And in college football, in our warped world of college football, where it used to be everybody just had a regular season, played a bowl game, and then you're right in a champ. Or everybody plays the regular season, and then a computer tells us what are the best 2 teams, and they play it, and then whoever wins is the champ. And then that expanded to what we got now, where 4 teams basically get voted in by a committee, and a 5th or 6th team always gets jobbed. Every other year gets jobbed. But then that's the way it is, and that's all we got, and they play it off, and those first 2 games usually aren't very good, but that last one typically is pretty good. Or we get at least 1 good game out of the 3, 1 really good game out of the 3 playoff games, the 2 semifinals and the finals game. Okay. But Spidey got me off on the tangent with where we talked about most of today about the college football playoff. The quarterback position specifically. Dylan Thompson is the best example I can give you from the Gamecock perspective of a quarterback getting way too much of the blame for a team not winning more games. Dylan Thompson set the record for passing yards in 2014 for Carolina. Now, a lot of that was because his defense kept giving up leads and the Gamecocks kept having to throw the football. But I thought he was a really good quarterback. He got some run in the NFL, so clearly it wasn't clear. He could play. I thought his career at Carolina was maybe undervalued, undersold. Maybe the more distance we get, the more time we have to appreciate it, the more we can see that or value it. But this year with Spencer Rattler coming in, man, and what the Carolina offense was specifically. And that's a lot of times, I think, how I value a quarterback. How much difference does he make from the last guy, especially if you have the same system in place? And so that's why I'm not quite sure how much credit to give Hendon Hooker. I think you got to give him credit because once they made the move to him last year from the Tennessee perspective and continued to learn and get more comfortable in that Josh Heupel system, the offense was just rolling. Tennessee's offense, one of the best in the country, and I didn't see that coming this time last year. I don't even know if the biggest Tennessee fan saw that coming. Stetson Bennett at Georgia. I got to give him credit, man. He's more than a game manager. Plays big in big moments. What you need, what Georgia needs from their quarterback. JT Daniel, big-time transfer, proved that he was better than him. So I got to give him a bunch of credit. And that's where the Will Levis conversation at Kentucky does make me kind of err on the side of easy, pump the brakes, guys. What has he done at Kentucky that other quarterbacks had not done? Well, touchdown Terry won a bunch of games at Kentucky and struggled throwing the football. Was not one of the better quarterbacks in the conference throwing the football, especially when he had to. Until you can prove to me that you're better than the last guy, or at least as good if you're coming into a Trevor Lawrence situation, taking over, I guess maybe even a Deshaun Watson situation, taking over for Taj Boyd at the time. You got to prove to me you earn my respect by showing me, and this is the Spencer Rattler situation too, right? That bar was set so unbelievably high. Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Spencer Rattler. The question is, how much of a drop-off was it really from Spencer Rattler? We're going to find out this year, I think, in a lot of ways. Because this is where I think the most fair expectation rise, the raise in expectations is for Gamecock football in 2022 on the offensive side of the football. In all of those numbers last year, from an offensive production standpoint, I mean, nearly all of them are around 100 in the country out of 131, I believe. If those numbers don't take a significant jump in year number 2 with Shane Beamer, the Gamecocks won't have a good season from a record standpoint. They just won't. You got to remember, they led the SEC in turnovers last year. Odds of doing that 2 years in a row ain't good, even when you have the best talent in the conference, right? But no one's arguing that South Carolina's defensive talent is the best in the conference. So to have that happen last year, Clayton White deserves a ton of credit. Jalen Foster deserves a ton of credit. But I'm of the belief, and I'll never forget Tommy Bowden one time at a Clemson press conference was just talking about turnovers and what he learned in his time that he saw growing up with Bobby Bowden's teams was turnovers can typically in college football go in cycles, right? And it's difficult to explain them. You can coach it all you want to. A great example is Will Muschamp at South Carolina. First year, that defense got a lot of turnovers, and that was the main reason why they were able to win 6 games. But at the end of the Will Muschamp, Travaris Robinson era on defense, Gamecocks struggled turning people over. And so from South Carolina's perspective, I'm sure, hoping it's not a one-year type new defensive philosophy or adjustments that other coaches weren't anticipating on the other side of the ball led to the turnovers. But obviously something changed with Will Muschamp's defenses, and they just weren't able to do it. And maybe it's just that natural cycle, right? Maybe that's just how it goes. Ray Tanner would always talk about the baseball gods. Maybe there's some football gods thing to that with turnovers coming your way. But the odds of South Carolina leading the SEC in turnovers this year are not good for a second year in a row. And that played a big part into winning games last year. And I think Shane Beamer would tell you, if they get the same offensive production that they got last year, it's going to be a long year. It's going to be difficult to win a bunch of games. So those offensive numbers, the most fair expectation from Gamecocks fans this year, it's much more fair to expect an improved offense, a bunch of improved offensive production, than it is to expect +2 wins, to expect to win 9 games. I think it's fair to expect to win 7 games again and yet have a much more improved offense. I think that would be enough for a lot of reasonable Gamecock fans to feel good about the program moving forward. Offensive production, number one, I think has to be what you expect in year number 2 when you're talking about improvements for Gamecock football. And Spencer Rattler plays into that a lot, right? Because worst case scenario is you get a really talented guy who was the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman quarterback this time last year into your program as your starting quarterback with an offensive coordinator who struggled and an offense that struggled in year number 1, and you still get the same results. Well, then that becomes an untenable situation real quick. And especially with improvement around the quarterback position too. This time last year, you're like, who's going to catch the football for Carolina? Okay, the running backs look good. Kevin Harris is a good running back. Marshawn Lloyd coming back off the injury, really talented guy. Zaquandre White, another guy who adds depth and can do it to a certain degree as a running back. Offensive line, pretty experienced, should be able to open up a few holes. Clearly had 1,000 yards with Kevin Harris the year before. They're going to be able to run the football. But Luke Doty hadn't proven he can throw it, and nobody on the outside has proven they can catch it. But this year, Spencer Rattler has proven he can throw the football in college. Say what you will about him, but he can throw it. Josh Vann proved last year he can catch it. Josh Vann is not the South Carolina wide receiver who's on the Biletnikoff Award watch list right now. That's Corey Rucker from Arkansas State, the transfer, who isn't even, by a lot of people's analysis, the most highly hyped transfer into the program at his position, with Juice Wells coming from James Madison. So you got those 3 guys out there. You add Jaheim Bell to the list, who lit North Carolina up from the tight end hybrid position, right? You add in Austin Stogner, the transfer with Rattler from Oklahoma. Proven tight end commodity to a certain degree. Then you throw in some other guys that Carolina even had in the mix. Amarion Brown had a pretty good bowl game. Takarion Joyner still out there at wide receiver as a bit of a Swiss Army knife. You got the guys out of the backfield who can catch the ball. Juju McDowell and Marshawn Lloyd. The pieces are there, and you have consistency on the offensive line. You have plenty of proven experience on the offensive line. So on paper, man, I think it is very reasonable for Gamecock fans to expect almost, what would that be, a 100% improvement if you go from 100 in the country to 50th in the country. a massive jump up in offensive production is necessary. Is a reasonable expectation for sure. And knowing that a tremendous line that got out and kind of the story of Spencer Rattler coming to South Carolina, where Marcus Satterfield, the offensive coordinator, says, "Hey man, people think you stink. If they think I stink, let's prove them wrong together." And I can totally see that hitting home with a guy like Spencer Rattler, highly competitive guy is what I'm seeing in QB1. Highly motivated, highly energetic kind of guy. Seems to fit Shane Beamer's personality pretty well as well. But it's all conjecture and speculation at this point, part of what makes talking college football great. And in a lot of ways, the polar opposite of the Clemson quarterback situation that got us talking about this, and Clemson being voted the overwhelming ACC favorite. What we heard from Dabo Swinney last week at ACC kickoff about his confidence in DJU at quarterback, having all the tools, just needs to put it together type deal. Wasn't able to do it last year. Hasn't been able to do it as the starter, as the face of the program. Has another massive opportunity now to do it. Huge question mark. I think he and Spencer Rattler, two of the biggest question marks, not just at quarterback, but just across college football storylines, man, nationally. This is not a South Carolina thing only. Spencer Rattler, a national name. A national curiosity, I think, going into this year. And if I had to place national storylines as far as where is a position that has the most pressure on it, Clemson quarterback number one. Not even close. This year specifically. Because quarterbacks get way too much blame and way too much credit, typically. This year, I think the Clemson quarterback position has earned that. Spencer Rattler and the South Carolina quarterback position, a different type deal. But if that offense continues to be what it has been under Shane Beamer, then it's going to be real difficult to have a good season. And Spencer Rattler will be looked at, will continue to be looked at how he's been looked at most recently, I think might be the fairest way to put that. Not what Gamecocks fans want to see. And I know Clemson fans are expecting a much improved position for their quarterback and much improved season from DJ if you believe what your coach has been telling you. And I don't know how many Clemson fans do believe it. And I get the skepticism after having seen Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence do it so well for as long as they had. And you can go back to Taj Boyd before then. Again, part of the beauty. It doesn't matter how much you believe it or not, really, as a fan, one way or the other, whether it's Carolina or Clemson. But it does make it all part of the fun, or maybe part of the anxiety you feel this time of year, the excitement, however you want to put it. That's why I love doing the program. Appreciate you joining us today. Oh, Meredith Taylor, with one final word, says she's on the golf course, wanted to log in and say hi. Let's play golf soon. Well done, Meredith. Well done. You do not want to play golf with me. It would be a lot of giggles. Maybe I don't want to play with you because I think it would be a lot of giggles from you. Appreciate it, Anthony. He says, a great show today. Appreciate all you guys weighing in. Spidey, RL, Troy, Roger, York, RL. I already mentioned you, RL. I'll do it twice. Craig, thank you guys. Hope and Anthony, Jason, enjoyed this morning's program. This is a great time of year to talk football and whatever else comes our way. NFL training camp's now going to be more about the ridiculous Aaron Rodgers entrances. Going to be football news coming our way, developments, stuff going down at training camp. Deebo Samuel actually showing up to 49ers training camp yesterday, and John Lynch saying he's encouraged they're going to get a deal done. That was, I think, encouraging news for the former Gamecock there on the NFL front. But that's a different discussion. We'll maybe get into that tomorrow. Who knows? what we'll do. We do have a couple of guests lined up for tomorrow. I know we'll talk a little bit more about Gigi Jackson. Didn't talk about him the entire program today. I'm sure some of you are pleased with that. We will touch on him again tomorrow. I'll tell you about some Gamecock Club preseason festivities going down in our state as well. Thanks for checking us out. Again, if you can, subscribe, comment, like, share, all that stuff would be greatly appreciated to grow this show. And thank you for being a part of today's July 27th edition of Tim Hill Unrestricted Free Agent.